There have been a bunch of different things hitting the courts when it comes to the Trump administration's executive orders. Of these many cases, some are coming with temporary restrictions, but none have come to formal rulings. But most recently, there has been a federal order. A federal judge in Rhode Island ordered that all funding that was frozen be given out as was the original plan before the executive order. JD Vance was then on Twitter saying what many are considering an insinuation that the judicial branch doesn't have the right to stop these executive orders or to require the executive branch to undo what they're doing. And while JD Vance said that a judge never has the power to tell a general how to carry out an operation, if your operation includes violating the law, then yes, they do. Generally, the executive branch refusing to listen to an order from the judicial branch or refusing to listen when something is deemed unconstitutional hasn't happened before. In the previous Trump administration, we saw a lot of talk and threats about not listening to judicial orders, but ultimately every single time the administration would listen to these orders. And when it comes to our nation's history, it just really isn't something that we've seen before, which leaves us with the question: if the Trump administration refuses to listen to these judicial orders, what recourse is in place? What recourse can be done? Generally, the judicial court has a few things in its toolbox. There's fines or sanctions, someone can be held in contempt of court, and they can even have jail time. Many of these are seen as somewhat toothless options. They don't really do much, and they aren't generally used against sitting cabinet members or against the executive branch in this way. It's generally used against your average Joe, maybe a corporation, which raises a lot of questions. Generally, this would then fall to Congress, that if the Senate stopped confirming the president's appointees or refused to pass further legislation. But so far we haven't seen a lot of grit from Congress, and that one's not really something we're looking to rely on in this instance. The other concern is that the judicial branch largely doesn't like to threaten its perceived power, that a lot of these things are based off of kind of social constructs and very exaggerated ways that things are. We see the judicial branch as so big and powerful because people listen to the power that it passes down. That making a ruling that they know isn't going to be followed would threaten that power and might stop judges from actually carrying out that order or carrying down that judgment, leaving some to speculate that the judicial branch might instead just focus on going against the administration and things that they know the administration can't execute either without the judicial branch or just can't execute, period. Things like trying to get rid of birthright citizenship. It would be a logistical nightmare, so denying this wouldn't really threaten their power because it's not something the administration can do anyway, so they can't go against the court's ruling. The other school of thought is that it might lead to retaliation, that the courts could refuse to carry out certain actions that the administration might need from them, or alternatively, that the states could refuse different orders given to them from the executive branch on the same findings. That, okay, if we can just ignore orders, then we're going to ignore your orders as well. Currently, many watching this are kind of just holding their breath. We're not quite at a constitutional crisis. The most blatant version of an actual constitutional crisis would be if the judicial branch tried to use the court-martials to grab someone at the cabinet and hold them in contempt or hold them in jail, but ultimately the court-martials are under the DOGE. So say that the judicial branch tried to use court-martials who were then ordered by the executive branch not to carry out that order. That would be more of a full-blown constitutional crisis. We're currently in the watch for a constitutional crisis. It's like when there's a tornado and there's all the ingredients to do a tornado, but there's not quite a tornado yet. We're in that stage. We've got all the ingredients out. A constitutional crisis could happen, but we're not quite there yet. It's unlikely that we'll see fully where this pans out and whether or not it reaches that kind of point for another few weeks. If the federal funding continues to not be dispersed, or as these other court rulings start to be issued, that's where we're likely to see whether or not there's a real conflict point here, or if it's just another instance of them trying to talk a big talk for their base, while actually behind the scenes they undo what they did with their tails between their legs. This is also where I remind you that it was laid out by our founding fathers that if a government ever tried to fundamentally take away your rights or overstep, that we don't just have the right, but the duty to stop them from doing so. Keep protesting in front of the Capitol. Keep protesting at your state capital. They're not going to do this with us sitting there quietly. If the executive branch did continue to try and violate judicial order, the best course of action would be through Congress. Remember, there are only 4 Republican votes that need to swing in order to stop things from going through. The American people as a whole find everything to do with Elon Musk, with DOGE, really unpopular. That representatives in all states are having their phones bombarded with calls of people being really worried about specifically these actions. Say they try and continue with these based off of these DOGE conclusions and these different things associated with Elon Musk. I don't think popular enough for Republicans to not retaliate, that even in Republican states their constituents don't want this to happen, that there would be consequences for violating on these specific fronts. That honestly, even if they were trying to not listen to the judicial branch on something else, something that was not as unpopular, it might be more of a concern. I would see it more likely to stand. Given that nobody is happy about this, it's not in their best interest, in order to get reelected, in order to not have their constituents absolutely appalled at them, to allow it to go through when it comes to these specific issues. Is this a constitutional crisis? No, not yet. And it better stay that way. What, are we gonna have to make more amendments and shit? Redo some things? I mean, maybe that actually would probably be a good thing, but just wow. Thanks, I guess. We'll get tons of reform. Maybe this time we'll prevent super PACs, you know? If we need some more amendments, can we throw that stuff in there? Just yeah. So explicitly the executive branch can't do these things, and also no more money going into politics. No more big super PACs. We don't want it.